Hello, everybody. My name is Matthew Monroe, and welcome to the first episode of Verses, a show that's to help the everyday person delineate between what is true of our lives and of our consciousness and of our universe, and what is an abstraction that's been given to us on those very same matters. Clearly, you can see this is not the most professional. I don't have any crazy video editing skills or transitions or anything like that. I'm just some schmuck from New York City who's trying to get this information out to other people. So, to continue, I'm going to introduce some caveats before I start getting into what I'm going to get into. My hope with this program is not only to teach people, but to possibly inspire those who watch to learn and teach it themselves. Essentially, the goal is to get people to be interested in this information as much as I am, to want to seek it out for themselves and verify it for themselves. Collectively, I think we can change the current human condition, because that's what it is. None of this is human nature. This is all our current condition. We can be unconditioned, but with the right message and the right actions. And so I'm hoping that this is a video and these chains of videos can help us do that. So, sorry, I'm reading off my notes here. Again, I'm not really a professional, but anyway, one of my last caveats is, before I begin, I would just like I'm asking you to turn off the mental chatter that we all have, okay? The blah, 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 blah that's going on constantly in your head. I'm going to try to have you just down that a bit, okay? Turn that down a little. It'll undoubtedly occur once you hear the information that's being presented to you. It's going to happen, but I'm going to ask, like I said, that you just hold off on it. Maybe even write your questions down, whatever, until the end, or until you have time to do the proper research. Internal biases make it difficult, if not near impossible, to logically process new information. So do your best to not have things like my appearance, my voice, where I am, or the truthfulness of my statements to color your perceptions of the overall topic before you do your own research. And yeah, that's another important part I really want to stress. Yes, you will have to research, and I will mention that multiple times, not only in this episode, but in subsequent episodes, because I'm asking for you to please not believe me. I'm not asking for you to believe me. I'm not asking for your belief. I don't want that. I am asking you to read what I've read and to ponder what I've pondered. Okay? That's what I really want. Even if you think I'm right, I still want you to go and look up what I'm talking about. Okay? So like I said, I'll probably begin each episode of Verses this way until the above information is properly assumed by the watcher. I don't know how many episodes that'll take, but just be prepared to maybe skip the first 4 or 5 minutes or so every time. Okay. All right. So with the caveats out of the way, we're going to begin with the topic of discussion for today. And that is, what is the occult? Truth discovery and method processing, and the very, very, very basics of one of the more principal occult teachings, which is Hermetics. Okay? So we're going to begin. So what even is the occult? You hear that word, what does that mean? The occult is a spiritual science that helps explain our connection to the all and its many emanations. It also helps us to align more with the will of those emanations. Okay? The word occult comes from the word occultare, from the Latin, which means to hide or be hidden. It simply was referred to as that because this information was not always so readily available. Okay, back in the day, orders and brotherhoods and cults and all manners of practices of that sort have kept that knowledge to themselves and to their members and their rankings in the past. This is just what it was. People knew that, you know, you couldn't necessarily share this as openly because of all the biases that come with it. People may not understand. And so they thought it'd be better to not share it at all, which I don't necessarily agree with. But anyway, that's not the point here. So before, if you were part of those orders or brotherhoods or whatever, you had to be actually initiated before you ever received any information like this. And these actual initiations involved life-threatening acts and feats, from things like having to hold your breath for 10 minutes long to circumcising yourself. Yeah, horrible things. Some things worse than others, but they wanted to make sure you were serious about getting this information and actually applying it. Thankfully, it's no longer like that, right? We can go on the internet, go on our phones, whatever, and look up all this occulted information, look up all these different doctrines, all these different pathings, and we can actually sit there and read about it all day if you want to, right? No one's forcing you to hold your breath for 10 minutes or to self-circumcise to get this knowledge. They're just asking you to read, and that's totally fine. So, you know, you may be like, all right, that's cool. Why should I care? Like, why is that important to me anyway? Like, I'm not trying to join an order or a brotherhood or whatever. Like, why would I want to know this stuff? And I'll explain. A knowledge differential will always lead to a power differential. And that is just as much of a fact as humans needing oxygen and water to stay alive. Okay? If there's a whole area of study with thousands of years of material that has doctrines and applications that could actually be put onto your life as well, and the lives of the people that you know and love, I mean, wouldn't you want to know about that too? Wouldn't you want to at least have some type of footing in the area to see if that's actually valid or not? I know I do. And wouldn't someone, let's say somebody who has, you know, nefarious intent, wouldn't they want to know that too? Someone who's like genuinely evil, I'm sure they'd want to understand that as well. It'd be pretty easy to control the faculties of another if they aren't even aware of the factors that are at play, which is what's going on with people not knowing what the occult is and how it relates to us. This is the explanation for our current human condition. These so-called elites are armed with generational knowledge that they use to manipulate our psyches at will and on a whim. I mean, and this is, if you just read Propaganda by Edward Bernays, you can get that clarified for yourself right there. That is not a lie. That is something that is actually done through social engineering. To continue, I'll get more into that in later episodes, so I'm just going to keep going, but knowledge of the occult arms one with the fundamental principles of our reality, okay? Once you're armed with those, once that munition is with you, you can then juxtapose our current day-to-day with these fundamental learnings, right? That's where you're going to apply logic to this stuff. I'm going to talk about all of this. Okay. Say you are actually interested, right? Where do you start? How are you able to determine what's true and what's fundamental? And this is where I will get into the method of truth discovery. Okay? One must have a method of truth discovery when undertaking this material. There are many ways to learn, the myriad of ways to learn, but I'm going to focus on what is known as the 7 liberal arts, with a narrowing on the first 3. So mainly the first 3 are what I'm going to really be touching on, and what I'm mostly going to touch on when I refer to liberal arts. It's not as if the last 4 are not as important. They are very important, but we need the first 3 in order to dive into this stuff properly. Okay. And I do want to clarify, the word liberal here does not have anything to do with our current day politics. It has everything to do with the actual word liberation, right? To free something. These seven arts free the mind from all bindings, and so that it is able to determine truth for itself and understand what it is for itself by relation. Okay? Sorry, I just got distracted by the vibration. Okay, so anyway, that liberation frees the user from any abstractions that are presented to them, any foreign ideas that are given to them, and gives them the confidence to know truth wholly and fully, without you just know it. You know it because you have this way of discovering and dissecting information. Okay, a person of such accord would be nearly impossible to control. Okay, and I want to stress that this is what it's really all about. Everything I'm doing here is information needs to be given out to you all so that we are less easily controlled by those who do control us. Okay, and like I said, this is only the first episode of Verses. It's very much going to be cumulative, and I will definitely get to those further parts that deal with our current day today. Okay, to continue. The 7 liberal arts are grammar, logic, rhetoric, time, music, geology, and astronomy. The first 3 are referred to as the trivium, Trivium, and the last 4 as the quadrivium, Quadrivium. Okay? Grammar, logic, and rhetoric, or the trivium, are the basis for everything you know, love, and enjoy, for the most part, right? Without grammar, one cannot combine symbols into words and ideas, right? Without combining symbols into words, one cannot then express their ideas or thoughts. And someone who cannot properly express their ideas or thoughts is basically fodder, is bait, is child's play to anybody who wants to implant their own thoughts into them. All right, you could easily become a vector for somebody else's thinking. So, again, I'm reading off of notes here. So if I dart away, that's why. It's of critical importance, though, to understand how each of these 3 apply to our learning process and the occultic material. All right, the grammar is integral. You got to know how to read. Okay, and I know a lot of people are listening to this like, okay, that's condescending. Of course I know how to read. I mean to read with understanding. Okay, you have to read with an intent, and that has to be done often. You have to read and exhaust the source material for any given topic. Okay, that means that you go back and you find the oldest books you can on what it is you're trying to learn, read from there, and go forward. No matter how long it takes or whatever it is, you acquire as much of that base information as possible. Okay? Because this will give you the basic grammar and definitions to understand the varied amounts of works that fall under any given topic. Okay? There's not just one writer for Hermeticism. There's not just one writer for Gnosticism, or for Freemasonry, or Rosicrucianism, or Thelema. There are multiple interpretations or looking at of these philosophical and occult paths that people just give their different perspectives on. And like I said, it's better to have a basis of grammar down and know how to cut out this information so that you can see what relates and what correlates and what doesn't. Okay? So like I said, exhausting the source material means you're going to read everything you possibly can on the subject. And I mean everything. Like everything that comes to mind, you're going to read it. Okay? And you're going to start with the oldest contributions to that subject. I won't make any bones about it. You're going to have to read, bro. You're going to have to do it. Even if it's, a paragraph a night or something, you're going to have to read this stuff. Okay? Some books will be easier than others to read, but those books that are not necessarily easy to read, those are the ones that are ripe with knowledge that can only be digested by having the basic grammar down in the subject, right? So that's grammar. Once you've gained enough knowledge to understand the basic grammar and concepts of what you're studying, it is then time to apply the logic to the information. Something like, is this information still relevant? What would make the writer describe this idea in this manner? Or why? Why would they describe it in this manner? Does anything I learned apply to any actions or thoughts that I have or that I notice in others? Does anything I learned apply to the overall attitude and actions of humanity as an aggregate? You must be critically honest with yourself here, right? This is where it's going to take a little shadow work. You're going to have to be really honest with yourself here during this process, okay? During this stage of the trivium. You must begin to think of your own thoughts and actions and apply what you have learned to them, okay? It's very important that that's done. Should it be logical to do so, right? You're not going to necessarily take in everything and apply everything, but the things that make sense to you and that you can focus on, they make sense to you for a reason. And that is where you would begin doing most of your investigation, right? So lastly, we apply rhetoric to this information, right? And we apply rhetoric to what we have gleaned here. You are to go out and discuss your ideas and your thoughts with others and put them to the test under the eye of scrutiny. This also will be a testament to the understanding of the topic where you can hold fast in a debate or teaching material, right? And I know that a lot of people don't like that part. They don't want to talk to other people, especially about this stuff. They would rather just, okay, well, maybe I know it and I don't care if anyone else does, or maybe I don't know this and I don't care to know it. You have to teach people. Okay, once you have this knowledge, once you understand this stuff, you got to get it out to the world. It doesn't do any good for the aggregate. It doesn't do any good for the species to keep it to yourself. Okay, everyone's got to know this stuff. We all need to be able to be well-versed and well-read in this stuff, okay? It would change a lot. Wisdom comes from the action one takes once they have gained knowledge and understanding, right? To not apply the rhetoric stage is to not be wise. And to not be wise means your knowledge and understanding are lacking. And that's just what it is. That's just me being 100 with you all, right? During this stage, you will still, of course, be learning, right? Because learning is an ongoing process. You learn until the day you die. But you should only really tackle it once you are confident enough and once you in what you know, right? Once you have a good base amount of the grammar and logic applied to this stuff, then you should go out and really try to talk to people about it, okay? Not everyone will want to hear what you're saying. I said that already, and not everybody will agree with it. And that's all right. The point is to plant a seed of an idea, not to necessarily win someone over immediately, not to convert them immediately and get them to start burning candles, on Saturnalia. That's not what I'm talking about. Simply just sowing a small hint of doubt in the logic of another person could be enough to spur them into action and expand their awareness. You know, sometimes it just takes one thought, one sentence, one kind of action for you to realize, like, okay, wow, maybe this is something that's relevant to me. So be brave. And I'm talking to myself as well here, because again, I don't normally do this. This is not something I ever really planned on doing. I always wanted to bring the occult to people, but I wanted to do it through artwork, through my book. And I still plan on doing that. But that is more of a longer process, and this information needs to get out now. We need to know this right now. Okay, it's very important, because obviously you guys, I'm not the only one that can see that things are not so great at the moment, right? It has a lot to do with our misunderstanding of the occult. So we've covered what the occult is, spiritual science, and I say the word science because it has repeatable and observable effects throughout space and time. It is not a belief. It is something that you can actually apply a concrete experiment to and get tangible results. Okay? So we know what the occult is, hidden spiritual science. We know why it's important. Knowledge differential leads to a power differential. And now we have the trivium under our belts, right? For the most part. You understand that you need the grammar, the logic, and the rhetoric to properly get this information in, under your belt, and out to other people. Okay, great. Not expecting anybody to be a master of that off of the first video, or to even really understand what that means. But like I said in the caveats at the beginning, please verify this information for yourselves. Do not just believe me. Do not believe me, okay? I would be happier if you were skeptical to everything I was saying and went and looked up every single word than you being like, oh, Matt, I love this. And yeah, you're right. I need you to look it up, okay? And that's going to apply right now, because what I'm going to do with these first episodes of Verses, before I get into the whole Verses aspect, I am trying to put out some very, 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 very basic outlinings of some occult teachings and paths to garner interest, not only garner interest, but to also get out multiple different walkings of information on this subject and see which one resonates with you the best, right? You may not like Hermetics as much as you like Gnosticism, and you may align to Gnosticism and want to start reading about that. That's great. I have no problem with that, right? But I do feel like everyone needs to have just a little taste, a small little sample of what this stuff is, so that if it piques your interest, I can tell you, and I will be telling you where to go to find more information on this stuff. Okay? So here we're going to mention Hermetics, and I'm going to discuss, like I said, the very basic principles of what Hermeticists understand the universe to be and what they know it to be. You're going to notice I will avoid using the word believe when referring to these people or these topics, because again, it is not a belief. It is observable, concrete fact, right? But it's only observable, concrete fact once you know what you're doing and can put it to the test for yourself, okay? So I think Hermetics is a great place to start learning the occult. Its fundamentals are kind of easy to digest, but not easy to apply to the overall, right? It's something that you can pick up maybe, but you're going to have to put in a little more footwork to really get it. Now, you don't have to start here. I know people who began learning through history in school, and that's how they got into the occult. I know others who quite a few others actually, who are part of a generational intent and have been born into an occultic pathing outside of their will. Okay? Origins don't really matter here. Doesn't really matter what you get into first, what you're interested in first, what you decide to discover first. As essentially everyone who studies this material, no matter what branching, no matter what pathing, comes to a common point, right? That the occult is a valid spiritual science that can help us understand our psyche and the relation of our psyche to not only the universe, but to every other human being in all of consciousness, okay? Hermetics now is based off of the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus, or the thrice greatest Hermes. And there's other key figures in there too, like Franz, Bardon, who I'll be bringing up a little later, okay? Now, like I said, I can do an entire series of lectures on Hermetics. It's a vast field of study with lots of material, the Emerald Tablets, Corpus Hermeticum, all that stuff, right? But there's much to cover in this show, in this program, in verses, before it's too late. Okay, so for this, like I said, I'll just give listeners a taste of the teaching. It is recommended, and I would dare even say required, to do the readings for yourself. If you're interested, you hear about the stuff that I talk about today, you want some knowledge or some information on it, please let me know. I will also be putting the titles of some books in the description as well. I have digital copies of most of this stuff. Okay, so if you need it, please ask me. It's not that hidden anymore. You can also really look it up yourself if you feel so compelled. Not that hidden. It's not that hidden. We can all look it up. I don't say that to be annoying. I don't want to sound like, your teacher or your parents. It's just that you really won't have the grammar to understand what I mean when I say this stuff. And the teaching, what I'm trying to teach you here, what I'm trying to impart to you here, will be just dismissed as folly. You won't care. You'll be like, okay, well, whatever. This sounds nonsensical, and I haven't done any of the footwork. I don't even know what he's talking about, so I'm not even going to bother really listening to this. We need to eliminate that, okay? We're going to eliminate that. All right? So here I'm going to just delve into the very basics for the Hermetics, okay? So in Hermeticism, the elements are the basis of all known mechanics in our universe. Elements are described as principles, meaning what comes first things, right? Fire and water are the two most important elements in life, with everything either being in its base form, a principal action of fire, or that of water. Okay? Fire is described as the electrical fluid, and is attributed to the self-sustaining nature of stars, nuclear fissions and reactions, down to the firing of neurons in our bodies, the small electrical signals that go through our bodies daily, right? Water is described as the magnetic fluid, right? It's the cohesive, the bonding, right? And it is attributed to aspects of cosmic law, gravity, thermodynamics, light, as well as the blood in our bodies that circulates through us. We are 70% water, right? The air and the earth are the last two, but these are not so much, I won't say they don't consider them principles, they still do, but they don't consider them as quote-unquote important as fire and water, okay? Air and earth are seen as conduits or catalysts for the first two elements, hence their passive or grounding nature, okay? Each and every action, thought, and object is based on these elemental understandings. A Hermeticist will take an object, look at it, and try to determine its elemental property based off of its function, its shape, things of that nature, okay? Its smell, its dimensions, all of that. right? They really take that into consideration because they understand that there's a fundamental underlying elemental principle in each and everything that exists on the planet. For each and every function, for each and every thought, for each and every object, right? There's an elemental property. This object acts more like air than it does like water. Okay, etc., etc., etc. All right? It's something you can do yourself too every day. You can just think of an object or see what's in your current field of vision. Try to determine its nature. Understand its nature. Okay, this is a stapler. What does a stapler do? Staples papers together. It binds things. Okay, binding nature. But a staple also has a more phallic shape. So does it require force to use a stapler? Yes. Okay, force is an aspect of the masculine principle. All right, so now we're on a 2 to 1 here. You can assume then that a stapler would have not only fire properties, but be a masculine object. It does not mean that women can't use it or that like there's no properties or elements to it that are of the feminine. It is just dominantly in a masculine energetical state. It doesn't mean that it can't be anything else or that it, and when I say masculine, feminine, I am referring to the mental principles, the genders, but I will get to that in very shortly, okay? So the Hermetics has something called the 7 Hermetic principles. Technically, I think there's 8, but one of them, the last one, the 8th one, is so over-encompassing that I'm pretty sure they just either put it to the side or forgot about it completely. Just didn't really even think about it. These principles are chords based off of observations and ideas that help structure our understanding of the universal elements that we are all subjected to. Okay, so like I said, these are just fundamental underlying principles that do apply to each and every aspect of our life. Okay, so the principles are as follows. The first one, the principle of mentalism. Okay, the principle of mentalism. All is of the mind. Every single thing is of the mind. What exists here must first have existed as a thought or an idea. Okay? You can just try disproving that for yourself. Is there anything you can think of that could exist and function properly without having to first be conceptualized? I think you'd be a little hard pressed, right? Even a straight line has to be thought about. Okay? If you understand this, or if this brings to you, then this could mean, being that we are emanations of consciousness, right? Each and every one of us, we must have then everything we know, everything we see, everything we feel, must have then existed in some mind or state before we ever did, before any of the universe ever did, and all the stars and all the space, all the time. It had to exist in the idea or the mind of some source, whether you want to call that the generative source, God, flying spaghetti monster, the intellect, Yahweh, Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh, like Brahma, whatever you want to refer to it as, Odin, Yaldabaoth, whatever you want to refer to it as, okay? This source clearly exists. It is clearly a part of our fundamental reality, whether you accept that or not, right? Because just as how you cannot bring something into physical existence without conceptualizing it, is the same way in which the creative source cannot do the same, okay? It's simply imposing the same limitations on our consciousness that it's on theirs, all right? And this will lead to the next principle, which is very important. The principle of correspondence, co-respondence, responding in like, okay, in conjunction. So, as above, so below. As below, so above. You guys have heard that before, everywhere. People have heard that before since the dawn of time, right? It's an old saying. This comes from Hermetics, all right? What composes the bodies of the vehicles of the heavens are also what is present in the composition and reactions of our bodies, okay? There's hydrogen in a red supergiant, and there's hydrogen inside of you. There's calcium inside of a red supergiant, and there's calcium inside of you, okay? The way in which those two act in those two different spaces or states are maybe a little different, but they're both required. They're required for both to sustain themselves, right? Once you understand that, you can then apply, okay, the principle of mentalism back to this. All right, if things are as below as they are above as well, then, and I can only create through doing something by thinking about it first, it should probably be safe for me to assume that whatever generative source or whatever I want to refer to it as might have some of these similar characteristics or impositions on itself or on the entirety of consciousness of itself. It would just be safe to assume that once you can understand mentalism and then correspond with it, right? The third principle is the principle of vibration. Nothing is truly at rest. There is a constant motion in each and every object. This is not really too far-fetched, as it only requires a very basic understanding of the nature of atoms to validate, right? Everybody knows that a solid object is not really solid, but that the atoms that compose it, are moving back and forth together so fast that anything else that's solid can't simply just pass through it. There's something there. Something is moving in that space as you're trying to press through it. And that's what gives an object the sensation of solidity. But it's not that it's like truly solid. It's actually still moving. That's important to understand. Everything essentially has energetical life within it. Even if it does not eat or sleep or poop or anything like that, it still contains moving energy. And moving energy is manipulable. But that's for later episodes. So, okay. The fourth principle is rhythm, the principle of rhythm. The pendulum swings evenly to both sides, is how it's described. But you can look at it as there being a natural sense of evenness, grace, symmetry, and precision in every aspect of creation, even in things that are destructive or involuntary, like a tsunami. There's rhythm in the tsunami. There's rhythm in everything, right? And this is where things like the Fibonacci spiral come into play, because it's a measurement that's able to be gotten out of pretty much almost any object, any symmetrical object in life. Again, this is not to believe. Please go look this stuff up. I will put it down in the description. The fifth principle is the principle of duality or polarity. Okay? Everything is also nothing. And nothing is also everything. Nothing becomes something. I'm just going to say this again. Nothing, the space or the act, the empty void of matter space, that nothing becomes something the very instant that pattern recognition or consciousness is applied to it. Okay? If there's an empty space behind me, but now that I just told you that there's an empty space behind me, it is now something, that empty space. If I didn't say that, if I didn't attribute that characteristic to this space behind me, it could be whatever it wants. It could be absolutely nothing. That's exactly what it is. It's not anything. But I am attributing what I know about my dimensions of reality, what I know about volume, shape, width, and length, to tell you that that's an empty space behind me. It's not really empty. There's things that are in it, air, electricity, atoms, all those other sorts of things. But I'm applying consciousness to it. I am now applying my pattern recognition to this empty space in order to give it the characteristic of nothing. I have to see that something is not in that space that I'm registering as nothing in order to call that space nothing. Okay? So it exists as everything and nothing simultaneously. It's potentiality, right? Duality, polarity. And like I can explain, I kind of went ahead of my notes here, but yes, the nature of nothingness still exists in what is now something, and that something can be reduced to nothing as well. You can destroy something and break it down completely, and just like that, it can go back to nothing. But it doesn't mean that it never did exist as something of the sort. You just applied a certain amount of action to it in order to get it to exist in that form. So, both natures or poles exist simultaneously of everything, right? If you have wet clothes, you just put your clothes in the washer. Could you ever dry them with more water? No, you couldn't. You couldn't do that. They will never be dried with more water. But they would, in fact, be dry, but with a lack of moisture, right? So you put them in a dryer. Is a dryer wet? Does a dryer produce water? No, it dries. It heats things up and it dries them out. The moisture, the aspect of moisture, is itself always present. It's always there. That moisture is there. Its degree of effect on the shirt or whatever you put into the laundry machine is just more or less depending on its state. Something is either has moisture or does not have moisture. And the word for not having moisture is dryness, right? So we have a word for it. It doesn't mean dry and wet are not the same. They are two of the same things. It's just that one has more wetness than the other. But they both exist in the same nature, in the same space. You would not be able to tell me something is dry if you never knew what being wet was, and and vice versa. You couldn't tell me what something wet is if you've never seen what something dry is. Everything's wet to you. You don't know what dry is, right? That's duality. That's the polarity, and that exists within everything. Okay, like I said, all these principles exist within everything. That's the whole point of them being the underlying principles of the entire teaching. The sixth principle, what are we on now? 6? Yeah. The sixth principle is that of cause and effect. The principle of cause and effect. Every cause has its effect, and every effect has its cause. Nothing is coincidence. I tell people this all the time. But in fact, is a happening in a series of happenings that align with one's choices and actions. This is what people used to refer to as natural law. I know that's not a term I've coined. That goes back as far as Seneca, I believe. Seneca was one to have mentioned natural law from my research. But it could be much older than him. I'm not too sure. Someone could verify that for me, or I can go verify that for myself later. What you do here matters and produces a result that adds to the aggregate experience of humanity. That's it. Things that are happening right now to us are the effect of some type of mentation, something that has been thought of first and then given to us in an abstract form in order to control the way we see or understand something, right? And then that causes us to affect change in our lives with our people glean from that information we glean from that abstract source. Okay? Cause and effect. Nothing that happens just happens for no reason. It began somewhere as an idea and manifested itself in the world through this way in its effect. The causal realm and the effectual realm, okay? The last principle is gender. Principle of gender. Every person and every object possesses both masculine and feminine traits. And I'm not here, I'm not talking about anything that relates to anything current day right now. I'm just talking about very fundamental components, masculine, feminine, right? This is true of the manliest of men and of the most graceful of women. We all contain pieces of the other, which are meant to be balanced inside of the mind of the wiser one, okay? The masculine is the driving force, the phallus, the thrust, the will, right? The feminine is the generative force, care, the womb, the chalice. Think about it like this. The warrior, sword and shield guy, he displays masculine energy when he thrusts his blade into his opponent. But when he returns from war and lifts his baby infant son into the air to give him a kiss and to hold him against him, he displays the feminine, showing that care and affection, showing that, although he can violently take someone's life, he can also care for the most basic form of life and show it love, right? This is a balance. It is and will always be about balance. And I won't be able to stress that enough. I will be stressing that probably almost every time. You gotta balance things out. And I'm saying that as a person who's doing that work themselves every day. I'm not coming from a higher place from you when I say this. We gotta balance things out. Okay, and I'm not just even talking about masculine and feminine. This applies to anything. Right? You don't want to overindulge. You don't want to underindulge. You want to make sure you're at the right amount so you can get what you need to get from anything. All right, so those are the 7 principles, okay? These principles, when they're studied and logically applied to all receive the known information that you have already, right? Excuse me. Provides quite an expansion to one's awareness. If you sit there and you try to take these principles and you try to see how they apply to your own life, this is even before you do any reading. You can do this stuff, right? You can just be like, oh, wait, well, that kind of sounds like it makes sense or whatever. But anyway, please mull this over. Okay, that's all the information that I'm going to be dropping in this episode. Please think this over. Seek out the writings of Franz Bardon, Introduction to Hermetics by Franz Bardon, and Trismegistus. You can start with the Corpus Hermeticum or the Emerald Tablet of Thoth to validate what I'm saying. I want you to go and look it up. I almost want to be wrong, if that makes sense. I want so many people to go and look this up that they can come back and tell me, like, yeah, you definitely have this wrong. This is a wrong point. Okay? Go and look this stuff up. And, try taking the time out of your day as well to hermetically deconstruct one thought or action you've taken or observed. Earlier, when I was talking about the nature of a stapler, that's what I mean. Hermetically deconstruct things. Not only just objects, because remember, it's not just objects, it's thoughts. It's thoughts as well. And actions. Right? Try to do that just once a day. Where you see something, you say something, or someone says something to you, and you try to apply those elemental properties to it, as well as see where it may have fallen into the principles of Hermetics itself. Why did they say that? Where did that come from? Does that have something to do with like a mentalism idea? Is this a reference to like correspondence? Okay, etc., etc., etc. Okay, I guarantee you will develop a new outlook on things if you do it this way. I guarantee it. I will stand by that. I really will stand on business, as they say, when it comes to that. So with this first episode down, we will continue establishing grammar through the very minor, and again, very minor, very, 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 very minor study of these different occultic pathings, okay? I just gave you guys a very basic introduction to Hermetics, and I'm sure there's better ones that are even out there on YouTube and stuff like that. You gotta get out there, you gotta read that stuff, okay? Next episode of Verses, I'm hoping to touch on, or not hoping, I will be touching on either Freemasonry or Gnosticism. It'll be in about 2 weeks, and I just have to find out which one is easier for me to streamline into a logical pathing for explanation for the next 2 weeks. It's most likely going to be Freemasonry. We're going to talk about Hermetic, very important figure. So, with that being said, I really hope you enjoyed, and I hope you learned something, even if it was something small, even anything at all. I really do hope that. And I urge you to share this with people, not because I want views or I want likes or for any monetary reason, because I can have all this information all I want to. It does not really do anything for me just sitting in my head. And it won't really do anything for you just sitting in your head. You can change yourself, yes, and you can mold yourself and become better and more attuned with the all for yourself. You can do that. But you still are a human in the aggregate. You still live in this condition where we are in a society. If other people don't know what you know, and it's super vital and important in honing yourself and understanding yourself and becoming more of yourself, which is consciousness having an experience through a vessel, right? Then what's really going to happen? It'll never really make sense to you either if you don't know how to explain it to others. You have to. It's just part of the rhetoric, part of the trivium, unfortunately, okay? It gets to that point. You got to talk to other people. All right. I really urge you guys to do the research. Again, like I said, share this with everyone. I don't care about likes or views. I want people to know this stuff. I want people to know it. I'm tired. I'm tired of being one of the very few people I know in my life with this understanding, okay? It's very frustrating, and it leads me to have to deal with my evolutionary progress being held back because the rest of the people on the planet don't even care they're enslaved, don't even care that they're mentally bound, okay? So please, get this to everybody you can. I would even say try it first with the people who you think will hate it the most. Get it to everybody. Get it to everyone, okay? What I say here will never make sense to you if you do not gather the basic fundamental properties required to understand the knowledge being presented, okay? It will never make sense. And I mean that. I swear I do. You gotta read it for yourself. You gotta apply it for yourself. There are things that you know about life that I may not know that could help you apply that understanding to that occultic teaching and have it fucking click right there. Excuse my language. I did great this whole time. Anyway, that'll make it click for you right there. All right? We gotta get that in. Okay? It will literally seem like mystical hogwash. If that's like, it won't seem like anything important at all if you have no idea of what I'm referring to. It'll just sound like a bunch of magical words or whatever. Like, how is that important? Okay? So, we'll get into this, but it's important because, like I said a little bit earlier, those that control us, whether you think that's a reality or not, and you'd be wrong to not think so, would hate for us to be well-versed in this field of study because then they could no longer use it to control our thoughts and our actions, right? And we could be free human beings. One of the later episodes of Verses, and probably one of the longest, is going to be what is slavery versus what is freedom, okay? it's going to be important to be able to delineate between what that is so that you can tell if we are in a condition of slavery or not, right? Well, okay. Thank you, everybody. Like I said, this is the first episode out of many. I don't know when I'm going to stop, but I plan on keep going until I've exhausted all the information that I know. And so I look forward to sharing with you all some more of this stuff next week or next 2 weeks. And please, like I said, look into Franz Bardon, Franz Bardon, and Hermes Trismegistus. You start typing that into Google, it'll finish it for you. Look into any of those people. I would personally recommend Introduction to Hermetics by Franz Bardon. Look this stuff up, read it, see what you think about it. It may not resonate with you. It just may not resonate, and that's completely okay. That's not the occultic teaching for you, and that's cool. You should still understand it. You should still try to understand it to the best of your ability, because that understanding will help you in the other occultic paths and teachings, because they all discuss this very elementary, very principal, very basic stuff. They all discuss this stuff, right? Because they understand that you have to have an underlying skeleton or some type of explainable empirical nature in order for more complex ideas to exist in that pathing, right? You need to be able to break them down to a fundamental component. So, yeah, sorry, I was long-winded, and like I said, thank you for watching. Bye for now, and please look this stuff up, share, and maybe even, try to teach yourself. Goodbye, and go in peace. Until the next time.